I stood at the entrance of the gala, the air crisp with the kind of cold that makes you aware of every inch of your skin. My father, Thomas, was already laughing, his arm thrown around my shoulders, as if everything was fine. Must be a mix-up, he said, waving his hand like it was no big deal. Don't worry about it. You'll get in. But the security guard's eyes told a different story. He glanced at his clipboard again, then back at me. Sorry, ma'am. Your name's not on the list. I knew what that meant. It wasn't a mistake. They didn't want me here. I tried not to let the frustration show, but I could feel the heat rising in my chest, threatening to spill over. My father wasn't bothered, though. He just chuckled again. Can you believe that? He turned to the guard. She's one of the biggest donors, you know? Just a little hiccup. Let her through. The guard didn't move, his expression as blank as a wall. He wasn't budging, and neither was I. Behind me, I saw Jack, my younger brother, waltzing in with his entourage, laughing loud enough to be heard over the crowd. Every eye was on him, just like always. The moment he stepped through, all attention shifted. He was the star, and I was invisible. Look at him, my father said, beaming. That's my boy. My mother, Marie, barely glanced at me as she passed by, her attention fixed on Jack. This event is all about you tonight, Jack, she said, voice sweet and proud. I could feel it, the distance, the way my family had pushed me aside for him for as long as I could remember. I stepped back, not wanting to argue, not wanting to make it worse. The guard's eyes followed me as I walked past the entrance. I didn't need his confirmation. I already knew what was happening. I wandered around the perimeter, keeping my distance, my mind racing. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. The moment it hit me, I'd been excluded, not by accident, but by design. A flashback hit me. High school graduation. Jack had been up front, giving the speech, as usual, the whole family raving about his future. My academic achievements, ignored. My time and effort, never enough. It had always been like that. I kept walking, the click of my heels the only sound in the empty stretch of pavement. My mind kept circling back to all the things I'd done, all the ways I'd pushed myself to prove I was more than just the good at organizing daughter. I'd earned my place at the family business. It wasn't flashy, but I worked hard in marketing and communications, built strategies that helped the company grow. I was the one who secured a major client partnership a few years ago, the one who helped launch our online platform when no one else thought it would take off. Yet, at every turn, Jack's sports trophies were the ones that made the rounds. His football games, his soccer wins, his every little victory, celebrated. And me? I was just there. My successes, the things I did that moved the needle, seemed to vanish the moment they left my desk. I remembered the promotion I'd gotten a few months ago. I'd worked for it, pushed for it, sacrificed so much. And when I finally got it, what did I get? A congratulatory text from my dad, but not really for me. More about Jack's soccer game win. I'm proud of you, kiddo. But did you hear about Jack? Huge game last night. Real star. My throat tightened remembering it. Jack had always been the golden child. At family gatherings, when they talked about the future of the business, they spoke of Jack as the next CEO, like he had some innate golden touch. Meanwhile, I was the one who actually ran the day-to-day grind, who made sure everything worked behind the scenes. But no one seemed to notice that. No one seemed to care. They didn't get it. They didn't get me. Every family dinner was the same. They'd look at me and say, Samantha's good at organizing, right? Like that was all I was ever good for, helping them keep things running smoothly while Jack stole the spotlight. It made me wonder, what the hell am I even doing here? I stopped walking, standing at the edge of the driveway, my breath coming quicker than usual. Maybe it was the cold air. Maybe it was the frustration that was pushing its way through my chest. The truth was, I didn't need their validation. I knew that, at least on some level, but damn, it hurt to constantly feel like I was invisible to the people who were supposed to be proud of me, who were supposed to see all the ways I had contributed. But no matter how much I tried to prove myself, it was like nothing would ever be enough. I could win every award, land every promotion, and still, Jack would be the one they talked about, the one they celebrated. I clenched my fists, the tension making my fingers ache. I hated that feeling, that desperate urge to prove something to them that I'd never get back. Even if I did everything perfectly, even if I gave them more than I had, it wouldn't change their focus. I wasn't Jack, and I never would be. That night, as I walked around the gala venue, I realized something. Maybe it wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about finally letting go of the need for their approval. The recognition would never come from them, not truly. It would only ever come from outside this tight little bubble they'd built for themselves. And I had to stop waiting for it to change. Maybe the real challenge wasn't earning their recognition, it was learning to accept that I was fine without it. I stood there for a while, watching the crowd inside, feeling more and more like an outsider with each passing second. I could have confronted my family, made some big scene, but what good would that do? They wouldn't listen. They never did. Instead, I turned and walked back toward the parking lot, not bothering to glance back. My heels clicked against the pavement, the sound hollow and repetitive, like the echo of something I couldn't get rid of. By the time I made it to my car, I was already thinking ahead. I didn't need to waste any more time in a place where I didn't matter. I had work to do, I headed straight to the office. The meeting with the client had already been set, and I needed to focus. The distraction of family wasn't going to help me move forward. I arrived at the building with a sense of purpose, walking briskly through the lobby and into the conference room. My team was already there, waiting for me. They knew what was at stake. The meeting was tense at first, but when I pitched the new campaign strategy we'd been working on, I could see the shift. The client, his name was Alan, some big shot in the tech world, started leaning in, nodding along. By the end of the hour, we'd secured the deal. It wasn't just another project. This was a game changer. It was exactly the kind of win that could put me on the map within the company. I felt a surge of pride, but it was brief. I had my eyes on something bigger now, something that mattered more than what anyone at that gala thought of me. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through my phone. My mother had sent me an email. I hadn't even had to open it to know what it was about. Just saw Jack's endorsement deal with that new sports brand. So proud of him. He's really going places. How are you, sweetie? Hope everything's going well with work. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the message. The urge to reply, to somehow draw attention to my own success, was there. But I resisted. I didn't want to ask for their recognition anymore. I didn't need to. Still, the frustration gnawed at me. Every time something went right for me, it felt like I had to shout just to be heard. Meanwhile, Jack's name was practically a household brand. He didn't need to prove anything, and they sure as hell didn't make him. I dropped my phone on the table and leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. It was clear now. I wasn't going to get their acknowledgement, not in the way I wanted. And I was tired of trying to force it. So I did the one thing I knew would get their attention in the end. I doubled down on my work. I didn't need them to see it, not anymore. My actions, my success, that was what would speak for me. The rest of it, the validation, the recognition, it wasn't coming from them. It wasn't coming from anywhere except me. And that had to be enough. I sat in the quiet of my apartment that night, feeling the familiar ache in my chest. The silence felt heavier than it had in a while. Every email I sent out, every meeting I nailed, every small success, it never seemed to matter to them. To my family, the worst part, I didn't even expect it anymore. The frustration wasn't new, but it was like it was intensifying with every moment I spent chasing recognition that I knew I wasn't going to get. I remembered the one time my father had called me the smart one. I was a kid, maybe 12, sitting at the dinner table while Jack was off somewhere, probably scoring some winning goal in a game that mattered far more than my straight A's. My dad had said, "Well, Jack's the athlete, and you're the smart one. You know, the backup." I'd never forgotten that. Even as a child, I could tell he didn't mean it as a compliment. It was a qualifier, a way to put me in my place. The smart one, the one who would always be second to Jack. That moment had stayed with me, lingering in the back of my mind every time my achievements were sidelined for Jack's latest victory. The backup never got the spotlight, never got the applause, just the quiet acknowledgement that they needed me, even if they didn't know how to show it. I forced myself to shake the memory out of my head. The truth was, I was tired. I was tired of hoping for something that wasn't coming. They weren't going to change. That weekend, I had a networking event. It was just another one of those things I had to do. Show up, make the connections, pretend like I wasn't silently screaming inside every time someone mentioned Jack's name. I walked into the venue, the usual crowd of business types buzzing with fake enthusiasm and too many cocktails. As usual, I found myself in a corner, checking my watch, waiting for the night to be over. Then someone approached me. Anna, a client I'd been working with for a few months. She was sharp, direct, and I'd always felt like she got me in a way that few people did. "Sam, I've been meaning to tell you what you've done with this campaign. It's been a game changer for us. Seriously, we're getting so much traction, and the way you've repositioned the brand, brilliant." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but not in a bad way, more like a release. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, not because I was chasing someone's approval, but because my work, was finally being recognized. I thanked her, but I couldn't stop the knot in my throat. She didn't know, but it was the kind of acknowledgement I had spent years hoping to hear from the one place I thought mattered most: home. I left the event a few hours later, still buzzing from Anna's words, when I got a message from my mom. She was checking in, as always, but her tone was almost too casual. "How's everything, sweetie? Jack's got a promotion at his job. They've been really impressed with him. He's on his way up, I tell ya. What about you, though? I don't hear much from you anymore. Hope everything's going well with work." I threw my phone down on the passenger seat of my car, biting my lips so hard I could taste blood. Jack, 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 Jack. How many times had I heard about Jack's promotions, his endorsements, his wins? How many times had my own victories been reduced to a footnote in a text message or, worse, ignored altogether? When I walked into the gala that night, the gala, Jack was standing there, more polished than ever. His suit looked better, his smile was brighter, his confidence so thick I could practically touch it. The crowd swarmed around him, asking questions, laughing at his jokes, hanging on every word. And there they were, my parents, all eyes on him, proud as hell. "Guess what? Big news. I'm getting promoted at work," Jack said, his voice carrying over the chatter. My parents exchanged proud glances. "That's our Jack. He's really going places," my father said, clapping him on the back. I felt a lump form in my throat. I could have told them about the huge project I'd just landed, an opportunity that would put me in the spotlight in ways they couldn't even imagine. But what was the point? I knew it would fall flat. It would get lost in the shuffle of Jack's latest win. So I kept quiet. The familiar ache spread through me, the realization that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many wins I stacked up, nothing would ever be enough to make them see me in the same light as Jack. I walked away from the group, stepping out onto the balcony for some space, trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep running this race for their approval. I had spent my whole life fighting for their recognition, but it was clear now that it would never come. So it was time to focus, time to prove myself in a way that couldn't be ignored, on my own terms, in my own world. No more waiting for their applause. It was time to stop looking to them for validation and start creating a future where I didn't need them to define my worth. A few months later, my phone buzzed while I was sitting at my desk, buried in a mountain of emails. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Hi, is this Samantha Roberts?" "Yeah, speaking." "This is Nicole from Global Marketing. We've reviewed your work on the campaign for the Miller account, and we're incredibly impressed with your vision. We'd like to offer you a leadership role in an international project we're launching next quarter. This could really elevate you in the industry." I sat there for a second, the words sinking in. The offer wasn't just a step up, it was huge. It was the kind of opportunity I'd worked for my entire career, the kind that could place me where I belonged, at the top of my field. "Thank you," I said, keeping my voice steady, even as my pulse quickened. "I'd love to hear more details." After I hung up, I let myself lean back in the chair. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel something close to pride. I'd finally done it. My work, the late nights, the sacrifices, it was paying off. But then, almost immediately, a weight settled over me. My first thought wasn't about celebrating. It wasn't about calling anyone to share the news. It was about how much I wanted to tell my family, but I knew better. A few weeks before, I'd attended a dinner with them at my parents' house. Jack had just signed a major endorsement deal, and the celebration was all about him. My mom had barely looked up from her phone as I shared the details of a new proposal I'd spent weeks perfecting. "Oh, that sounds nice, sweetie. I'm sure it'll work out," she'd said without looking at me. Then, in the next breath, she launched into Jack's latest deal, practically glowing as she told everyone about his new sponsorship. I'd been invisible again. It wasn't even that they didn't care, it was that they didn't get it. My achievements were always just nice or fine, like the work I was doing didn't matter the way Jack's did. This new opportunity, this huge career-defining project, was mine. But it was hard not to feel like a stranger to my own family. Every time I made a step forward, I didn't feel celebrated. I felt alone. I began to get attention outside my family, though. My name started popping up in industry publications. My recent work was gaining traction, and people were starting to recognize me for the talent and drive I'd always known I had. I was being invited to speak at conferences, asked to contribute to panels, but the recognition still felt hollow. None of it was coming from home. I had built this entire success on my own, without any real validation from the people who should have been proud of me the most. One Sunday, my parents invited me over to their house. I hadn't told them about the international project yet. I wasn't even sure why I was still trying to share anything with them, but I figured I'd test the waters. Maybe, just maybe, they'd be different now. I walked in, and the usual energy hit me. Jack was lounging on the couch, his phone in hand, a cocky grin plastered across his face. My parents were talking to him about some new venture he was pursuing, and I could already tell where this was headed. Then, my mom turned to me casually, almost as an afterthought. "So, how's that new project you're working on? You still keeping busy?" I blinked, thrown off by the lack of enthusiasm, but I answered. "Actually, I've been offered a leadership role in a major international campaign. It's a huge opportunity for me, something I've been working toward for a while." She nodded, not even fully meeting my eyes. "That's nice, honey. I'm sure it'll keep you busy." That was it. Not a word of pride, not a single bit of excitement, just a brush off, like it didn't really matter. I looked at Jack, who was still staring at his phone, and felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The disconnect between us had never been clearer. My phone buzzed again. Another press release about the project, another win that no one at home would acknowledge. And yet, there it was, proof that I had made it. My success wasn't something they could ignore forever, but maybe it didn't matter that they didn't see it. Maybe it wasn't about them anymore. The call came in the middle of the afternoon, right when I was getting lost in a project proposal. I barely recognized the number on the screen, but something told me it wasn't just another run-of-the-mill sales pitch. "Samantha," a calm, authoritative voice said when I picked up, "this is Brian Lewis from Northfield Enterprises. I wanted to reach out personally to offer you a major partnership. After reviewing your work on the Miller campaign and your recent projects, we'd like to bring you in to lead our next international initiative. We think you're the perfect fit." I froze. For a second, I didn't know what to say. This was it. This was the big one. The deal that could elevate me to the highest echelon of the industry. A partnership with a prestigious company that would solidify my place in the field. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. "I'm honored, and I'd love to hear more about the next steps." We talked for another 20 minutes. By the end of the conversation, I knew this was the breakthrough I'd been working for. I'd made it to the level I had dreamed of, the level my family could never see me on. This was my victory. But even as I sat back in my chair, I couldn't escape the memory that had been haunting me for so long. At the family dinner, Jack had been running his mouth as usual, bragging about his most recent promotion at work. It was the same routine, talking about himself while the rest of us listened, trying not to roll our eyes. But that night, it was different. My father had looked at Jack with such admiration, pride radiating off him like a spotlight. "Jack's really going places," he had said, his voice full of certainty. "He's got a real future ahead of him. You'll see, he'll be CEO one day." I'd heard it before, but that night it hit harder than ever. It felt like the final nail in the coffin. Jack's success had always been the focal point. He was the one who had their attention, the one they always saw as the future of everything. And me? I was still just the backup. I snapped out of the memory, feeling the weight of it again. But this time, it wasn't as sharp. I'd taken that weight and turned it into something else, a driving force that had pushed me to where I was now. A week later, the press release went out. I made my first public announcement about the partnership. I stood in front of the cameras, the bright lights catching every angle of my face, and I said the words I had longed to say. "I'm proud to announce my partnership with Northfield Enterprises. This is the beginning of something big, and I'm honored to lead this project." The release made headlines. Industry insiders shared it on social media. My name was everywhere. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in control of my own narrative. This moment, this success, it couldn't be ignored, not by anyone. I was still riding the high when the email popped up in my inbox. It was from my dad. "Congratulations on your new partnership. Glad to see you're moving forward. Keep it up." It wasn't much. It wasn't exactly the burst of pride I had hoped for, but it was something. It was a recognition of my success, even if it came in the form of a half-hearted email. At least it meant he had noticed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. This moment was mine. The satisfaction, the rush of accomplishment, it was mine, and no one could take it away from me. It didn't matter that he'd only acknowledged me because of the external validation, the press, the noise of it all. For the first time in my life, I knew I didn't need him or anyone to tell me I had made it. I had made it. And no one, not even my family, could take that from me. I couldn't keep putting it off. It had been months since the partnership with Northfield Enterprises, and while I had achieved things I once thought would get the recognition I craved, I was still waiting for a moment that would never come. So, I made a decision. I was going to confront my family, not out of anger, but out of necessity. I couldn't keep living in their shadow. I called my mom, asked her to set up a family dinner. No special occasion, just a Sunday evening with the usual suspects: Jack, my parents, and me. I needed them to hear this. All of it. The evening came, and I sat at the table, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. My mother and father were already talking about Jack's latest promotion. He'd just gotten a big new role at work. Same story, different day. They always treated his wins like they were the only ones that mattered. But tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I wasn't going to shrink back. "So what about you, Sam?" my dad asked between bites of his steak, not even glancing at me. "How's everything at work? Still pushing paper around, I assume?" The words stung, but I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to snap back. I had to do this right. I cleared my throat, setting my glass down carefully on the table. "Actually, I'm not just pushing paper around anymore. I've been offered a leadership role in an international project with Northfield Enterprises. It's a massive opportunity for me, and it's something I've been working toward for years." The room went silent. My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Jack looked up from his phone, his expression unreadable. My mom blinked, but it was clear they were caught off guard. For once, their focus was on me, not Jack. Jack shifted in his seat. That's great, Sam. Big deal, huh?" He laughed, but it was forced. Almost like he didn't know how to react to my success now that it was in the spotlight. I didn't let it faze me. I was done shrinking. "Yeah, it's a huge deal. It's the kind of project that could define my career. I'm leading a global campaign that could change the entire direction of the company. I'll be overseeing teams across multiple countries. It's the kind of responsibility I've earned." I saw the awkward glances exchanged between my parents. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. He cleared his throat, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Well, that's impressive, I guess." He said it like it was an afterthought, like it didn't really matter to him. But I could see the tension in his shoulders. The words weren't flowing as easily as they normally did when talking about Jack. "I knew you were doing well, but this is really something else," my mother said, her voice soft but still somewhat detached. She was more concerned about her salad than my achievement. Her tone was polite, but there was no warmth behind it, no real pride. Jack, ever the defensive one, finally spoke up. "I mean, yeah, Sam, but this kind of thing isn't exactly rare. It's not like it's the first time anyone's ever landed a big project. It's great, sure, but you're always so quiet about stuff like this. Just, don't get too cocky." His words stung in a way I wasn't expecting, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need his validation anymore, not from him, not from any of them. I leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with my dad. "I've worked for everything I have, and this project, this opportunity, is a direct result of that. I didn't get here because I was quiet. I got here because I was good at what I do. I don't need to apologize for it anymore." There was a long pause. My dad shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting on the table. He finally muttered, "Well, I suppose that's good, Sam." It wasn't much, but it was enough. It was the first time in my life I felt like I had finally taken control of my own story. Jack looked like he wanted to say something else, but he held back. There was an awkwardness in the air now, a change that no one knew how to navigate. The spotlight had shifted, and they didn't know what to do with it. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for their approval. I wasn't looking for their praise or validation. The silence that followed my words wasn't uncomfortable for me. It was just truth. I finished my dinner without saying much else. The conversation shifted back to Jack's work, of course, but I didn't care anymore. My victory was already done. After dinner, I left without any fanfare. My father said goodbye like he always did, a half-hearted wave. But this time, I didn't feel the need to linger, waiting for something I'd never get. I walked out of that house knowing that my success didn't need to be validated by anyone else. It was mine, and that was enough. The months that followed my family dinner were a blur of success. My career began to hit the stride I'd always known it could. The international project with Northfield Enterprises was only the beginning. My work was being recognized by major industry players. My name's starting to pop up in articles, publications, and on the lists of leaders in marketing. I had a solid footing now, and it felt like the world was finally starting to notice. At one conference, I met an influential business leader, Greg Donovan, a name I'd heard in the industry for years. I was introduced to him after a panel discussion, and when I mentioned my work with Northfield, his eyes lit up. "You're the one behind the Miller campaign?" he asked, his voice laced with genuine admiration. "Your team did something that no one thought was possible. Your creativity and execution are exactly what the industry needs." The praise was overwhelming, but it was the kind of recognition I was getting more and more of. It felt real, not just like a fleeting compliment, but like people were finally starting to see the depth of my work. But as I drove home from the event, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family would never see me the way these people did. They would never understand how far I had come, or the weight of what I'd accomplished. The realization hit me hard, but it was also freeing. I thought back to my first major project, the one that had set everything in motion for me. The one where I had quietly carried the business's growth on my shoulders. Jack was off winning sports awards, being praised for every little move he made, while I was in the background, orchestrating things, organizing, building. That project had been my first true test, and while Jack got the applause, I was the one who made sure things actually worked behind the scenes. I didn't need the spotlight then, but I needed the acknowledgement, the kind that never came from home. Now, though, I didn't need their applause anymore. I was finally in a place where my success spoke for itself, and I had built a path that didn't depend on anyone else's validation. At my parents' house, the atmosphere was still the same when I visited. Jack's new achievements were always the main conversation topic, but I'd stopped feeling invisible. Even if they didn't see me for what I was, I had learned to see myself. One afternoon, my mom sent a casual text asking how my work was going. I could tell from the tone that she wasn't truly invested, just going through the motions. But something in me had shifted. I no longer felt the need to prove myself to her, to anyone. My brother had just signed a new deal with a major brand, a sponsorship, of course. My parents were celebrating it like it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Meanwhile, I was quietly landing bigger deals, changing the industry, but I didn't care to share that with them anymore. Instead, I focused on my own path. I began spending more time with people who saw me, people in the industry who appreciated my work, people who didn't look at me like I was a sidekick to Jack's success. The satisfaction that came from knowing I had built something solid for myself, without needing anyone's approval, was enough to make me forget about the lack of attention from home. I didn't need them to define me anymore. My work had already done that. As my career soared, my relationship with my family remained strained. The disconnect was there, unspoken but undeniable. But it didn't matter. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I had learned to stand on my own, not as their afterthought, but as someone who had earned their place in the world. And for the first time, I was okay with that. The family reunion was at my parents' house. The house was filled with the usual chatter, laughter, and the smell of my mom's cooking. But this time, I felt different walking through the front door. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked in a year ago. I wasn't the quiet daughter looking for a shred of recognition. Jack was already there, as expected. He greeted me with his usual charm, talking about his latest adventure with a new sponsorship deal. I smiled, nodding, but inside, I didn't care. I didn't need to hear it anymore. My parents were at the grill, flipping burgers and exchanging stories. But when I stepped into the yard, my father's gaze landed on me. It lingered just a little longer than usual. He looked proud, maybe even surprised. He didn't say it, he never did, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. "You look great, Sam," my mom said as she hugged me, her voice warmer than it had been in a long time. "How's work?" "I'm doing well," I said casually. "I'm leading a new global initiative for Northfield. Big things ahead?" She nodded, a soft smile crossing her face. "That's wonderful, sweetie. I'm proud of you." I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. For so long, I had waited for this moment, hoping for something like that from her. But I realized, standing there in the middle of their yard, that it didn't matter anymore. Her approval, my dad's pride, it didn't make me who I was. I had done that on my own, without them. I remembered 1,000 dinners where Jack was the star, where my own achievements went unnoticed or were brushed aside. I remembered how I'd tried to make them see me, tried to get them to recognize what I was doing, only to be overshadowed, overrun by Jack's latest accomplishment. But not today. Today, I was no longer that girl. Today, I stood in front of them as a leader in my industry, and it was enough. We ate dinner, the conversation mostly revolving around Jack's next big career move, of course. But I didn't feel invisible anymore. I was different. I was standing on my own, in a space where their approval didn't hold the weight it once did. As the evening wound down, I knew it was time to leave. I wasn't running away, but I had outgrown the need to hang around, hoping for something that would never come. My legacy was no longer tied to their praise. I had built it on my own, and it was mine, solid, undeniable, and real. I said my goodbyes, hugged my mom, shook my dad's hand. Jack waved from the porch, a little too casually, and I walked away. As I got into my car and started the engine, I felt a quiet pride settle in my chest. I had finally made my own mark, and that was enough.